This is where it all started for us at Evo India. After 12 years of being a motoring journalist, I'd given up on that really cool job to sit behind a desk and road test that damn desk. I quickly realized that I hated it, and I spent every single minute of my free time working on our rally team. And while doing that, we realized that there was no magazine that truly reflected our enthusiast focus. And so I gave up on that job, burnt my ties, burnt my suits, and started Evo India magazine. And the car that we went rallying with? It was the Polo. Welcome to a very special episode of Gone But Not Forgotten, where we are celebrating a car that lasted for, would you believe it, 12 long years. We've got the very first generation of the 1.2 petrol, the 1.2 diesel. We've got the 1.6 petrol, the 1.6 diesel, the 1.5 diesel, the GTI, the race cars, tuned cars, a whole bunch of cars, because this car was a favorite with enthusiasts as well. And before we go ahead, don't forget to smash that bell icon, stay notified for all our video drops, give us a like, and let us know about your Polo memories in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And even though the Polo has gone, all the lessons learned from the Polo have gone into the Taigun. The ride, the handling, the dynamic properties, the torsional rigidity, the sheer fun to drive factor from the Polo has gone into the Taigun. And that's what we are also going to be talking about in this video. So stick around till the end. The Polo lineage dates back to 1975, where it first came in as a rebadged Audi 50. Yep, the Polo was a rebadged Audi. In India, we got the 5th generation Polo, and I first experienced it on beautiful roads in Sardinia. That was the time when we drove the TSI engine also for the first time, and we were super excited. And then when we drove the car in India, we got the 1.2 TDI, which wasn't very powerful, but this was a noisy engine and it couldn't really move the car. Those days, diesels were very, very important. Maruti had the 1.3 diesel that they had gotten from Fiat, and that was doing rocking numbers in the Swift. And VW had their sights on Maruti Suzuki. Their ambitions were massive. Their ambitions were nothing less than total market domination with the Polo. And they really went all out, all guns blazing. The media push, it was unbelievable. They had that musical ad. I remember picking up that Times of India in the morning and dropping it back because I thought there was a lizard inside the paper, because it played some sort of music. They had that roadblock where every single page had something on Volkswagen, teaching Indians how to pronounce Volkswagen. Their media drive, it was a sea of red Polos, an absolute sea of red Polos parked in that parking lot at the Taj in Mumbai. Both petrols as well as diesels, all in red. There were, wow, I don't remember, maybe 50, 100 journalists. Everybody had a car to themselves. I've never seen so many cars at a media launch ever. I think now Mahindra with the Scorpio, they had 150 Scorpios, but until then, never seen so many cars at a media launch. VW really went all guns blazing. This was the first car that I drove, the 1.2 TDI. And I was not that impressed, to be honest. Well, before that, I also drove the Polo at the Volkswagen plant. And I had Jörg Müller, who was then the president of Volkswagen India's operations, the Volkswagen Group's operations. He sat behind me. And he said that the Polo is very comfortable at the back, but the Polo was never comfortable at the back. The poor guy, he looked so cramped out there. And that was one of the big failings of the Polo. Space. No matter what they did over the years in terms of the engine, in terms of upgrading the infotainment, what they couldn't do anything about was the space. And the space always was tight. It was always a cramped car. But right from the beginning, it was always a fun to drive car. The chassis, the suspension, the balance. So driving those very first Polos from Mumbai to Ambi Valley up in Lonavala, the Polo, it felt so confident, so planted, so stable. It was excellent. Except it just struggled to get up to speed. You really had to push it. You really had to cane it to get up to speed. It was a torquey engine. Second, even third gear for these hairpins out here. Fine. No worries. But it really struggled to get up to speed, and that was a problem. In addition to the diesel, the Polo also got the petrol engine. That's what we are driving right now, and this is the facelift with the new steering wheel, the new infotainment, but the engine remained the same. 74 bhp of power, which was not enough, especially because the Polo was a heavy car. In fact, the Polo was the heaviest hatchback that you could get. Volkswagen, they did not compromise in terms of the body, in terms of the strength of the body. This car was designed to hammer down German autobahns at 200 kilometers per hour, and when they brought it down to India, they didn't compromise on that front. Only thing, it couldn't hammer down our expressways at 200 kilometers per hour because these engines just did not have the power to hustle the Polo. The problem was that because the Polo had such great chassis, such great suspension, such great stability at speed, this only enhanced that sense that the engine was underpowered, that it could not really stretch the limits of the handling, of the suspension. Though I have to point out that this engine has a good amount of torque. So when you're driving it in the city, no problem. You don't feel it lacking in power. And when you drive it out here on the go-kart track, you stick it in second, and there's enough grunt to make it go down these corners really fast. Plus the steering feels lovely, heavy, but just connects you with the car so much better. We loved everything about the Polo except for one thing, and that was the lack of power. That was addressed with this car, the GT TSI. The 1.2 litre engine, it was the most powerful small capacity engine. 103 bhp, 175 Newton meters of torque, and this engine was the most technologically advanced small capacity engine in the country. Direct fuel injection, turbocharging, and it was mated solely to the 7-speed twin clutch automatic gearbox, the DSG gearbox. So this TSI engine with the DSG transmission, it was phenomenal. It was way ahead technologically and in terms of performance over anything else that you could buy. Not just at this price, but at a considerably higher price point too. It gave you that sense of confidence, of solidity, of security. The way this sat on the road, nothing drove like the Polo. We did so many stories with the GT TSI and it won everything. The only downside was the price, the space at the back. Also, this DSG gearbox in the city while crawling, it can get a bit jerky with the clutch engaging, disengaging. There were a few issues also with this DSG gearbox, but not so much. And everybody who owned the GT, all of them loved it. It did 0 to 100 in just above 10 seconds. Top speed of 192 kilometers per hour. A small hatchback doing 192 kilometers per hour. And I can tell you with all confidence, and because we did it, that at 192 kilometers per hour also, it felt planted, stable, crosswinds would not move it. It just sat on the road like a champion. The GT badge signifies premium Volkswagen. So even with the Taigun, the 1.5 gets the GT badge. This is the car that gave birth to the legend of the GT. And everything that you heard about the GT, all of that is true and then some more. Everybody remembers the GT TSI, but VW, they also had the GT TDI with the 1.6 diesel engine from the Vento. And this engine was fast, 109 bhp of power, a ton of torque. Even though the Polo was heavier than the Swift diesel, the power of this engine made sure that it smoked the Swift diesel. 0 to 100 in little over 11 seconds. This car was proper fast. With this Polo, VW also stiffened up the front end because the earlier Polos, it had a tendency to ground out. Because the front end was soft, it delivered great ride, no doubt. But if you went over a bad road, or say if you went over a speed breaker too fast, the nose, it would ground out. There were also issues with the sump cracking because it would hit. That soft it was. But that was cured. And with this car, it really didn't affect the ride. The handling still remained good. And the performance, man, it really had performance. It really moved. This diesel engine also, it gave terrific fuel efficiency. Later on, when the facelift came, the 1.6, it was downsized to 1.5. And the reason was to take advantage of the small car excise duty regulations. Because with a 1.5 diesel, you could get those excise breaks and it became more affordable. Also, that 1.5 came in 2 states of tune, and of course the highest state of tune was in the GT TDI. We have an example out here, but of course it is heavily modified, and in fact we got a lot of modded cars, so we'll jump into those modded cars also in a bit. This engine, like all VW diesel engines, noisy, but also like all VW engines, very, very efficient. I remember once doing a rally recce in a Vento TDI with a 1.6 engine, and from the time I picked it up till the time I returned it after 4 days, it hadn't even finished off 1 tank of fuel. Excellent fuel consumption, brilliant power, Gosh, I miss those diesel days. By 2013, the trend for SUVs had really taken off. And so Volkswagen tried to turn the Polo into an SUV with the Cross Polo. Basically, what they did was they slapped on black body cladding to make it look a bit chunky, a bit off-roady, a bit SUV-ish. And that was that. The ground clearance, I think, went up by 3 mm or something. I'm not sure. But in reality, the front end was still soft. So if you went over a speed breaker too hard, you could ground out the nose and you could damage your sump. So basically nothing really changed. The suspension, the setup, everything was the same. The engines also were the same. This one is the 1.2 diesel, makes 74 bhp of power. Like I said, not much, but it was torquey enough, a little noisy. The interiors, they remained the same. So the same steering wheel. The engines, it remained the same. So this one is the 1.2 diesel, the 3-cylinder diesel, noisy engine, and not much in terms of power, 74 bhp. But torquey, so it's okay, but nothing great. Later on, it also got the 1.5 diesel. But this Cross Polo, it never sold that well because, well, people wanted an SUV. They didn't want a hatchback with body cladding. It's a rare car. For all the black cladding, and also it had roof rails that could hold proper weight, Volkswagen, they charged you 60,000 more. Not many people were willing to pay 60k more for what was basically a mechanically identical package. And I don't think the Cross Polo sold in any great numbers either. This is another rare car. Have you seen one on the road? Let us know in the comments below. Of all the generations of the Polo, this is the one that I am most familiar with. This is the 1.6 litre petrol, and this is the car that we took rallying. So I used to rally the CDR, a couple of friends used to rally the S-Team, and we all got together to put together a car that was contemporary, that people could recognize, not cars that were out of production, and we picked on the Polo. We thought that the Polo would be the perfect car to get into rallying. VW Motorsport, the then head Prithviraj Siddhappa, he really helped us out with getting the cars, prepping the cars. And in 2013, I took the first win for the Polo in its class in rallying. South India Rally, still remember that. We were not very prepared, my suspension was awful, but the car, it still performed. And since then, got a shelf full of trophies, all thanks to the Polo and this 1.6 engine. So this engine in stock trim, it made 104 bhp. We obviously upped it with aftermarket ECUs, exhaust, blueprinting the engines. But the best part was always the chassis. The chassis, it was so torsionally rigid. It lent itself beautifully to the tight corners. So initially the CDRs were faster because those had 2-litre engines. But then over time, developing the cars, we made the Polos faster than the CDRs. And thanks to us, thanks to what all our team, Slideways Industries, did, the Polo, it became the most popular car in Indian rallying. So today, if you go for any INRC event, I think 80% of the grid is comprised of Polos, and in all states of tune. Man, what fun this was. And this gear lever, well, my car, the gear lever, it was a little taller, but it sort of reminds me of that. This car is also running an exhaust, sort of reminds me of the car. Because of the 1.6 litre engine, this spec, it couldn't really get the excise duty brakes. And that's why this was more expensive than the regular Polo. That made it a bit niche. People still bought the 1.2s because it was more affordable. But the 1.6, so many of us went rallying with it. So many good times. I must also mention the gear shift on the Polo. Fantastic. Don't ever let anybody tell you that India did not get a hot hatch, because India got a proper hot hatch in the Polo GTI. This is that car, the unicorn. The one that was launched at quite a frightful price, but eventually they were sold at 18 lakhs or something on road, which was phenomenal value. This was always going to be niche. A two-door Polo, not as practical as your regular four-door Polo, and also a two-door Polo that looked very much like your regular four-door Polo, costing 25-26 lakh rupees. Always going to be niche. But once you drove it, man, you fell in love with this car. We've driven all these tuned Polos, but a factory GTI, nothing like it. It feels so much tighter, easier, yet faster. This one has the E8888 1.8 litre TSI engine, makes 190 horsepower, and it's fast. The gearbox, a DSG twin clutch gearbox, but also tuned for speed. The exhaust, not overpowering, but sweet. This car won our inaugural Thrill of Driving award, and for good reason. The suspension, it's comfortable, but yet so planted. The XDS Plus differential, it's an electronic differential, but it works so well, gives this car so much more bite. It also feels so good from the inside. The steering wheel, it looks somewhat like your regular Polo steering wheel, but so much more tactile delight. The seats has got this tartan pattern, which is a characteristic of the GTI. Small little tweaks to the interiors to make it a little bit more special. And this is a special car. Paddle shifters on the steering wheel, which your regular Polo did not get. Oh, I love it. I was offered one at 18 lakh rupees on road, and I did not take it. Stupid me. What a joy this thing is to drive. All the Polos are a joy to drive. This one is just much better, much tighter, more sorted. And the faster the track, like a proper racetrack, oh, the faster this is. More engaging, more involving. You can throw it around so much better, so much harder, so much faster. Oh. Brilliance. This is the very last of the Polos. 1.8 TSI engine. Now, I don't know how much you'll be able to hear of me, but I'll still try. So 1.8 TSI engine, a sequential automatic gearbox, and proper race-bred stuff. Oh man! The best of the Polos. The LSD working. The Polo has a massive motorsport history. Right when the road car was launched, it went racing, first with the TDI diesel cars and then the TSI turbo petrol cars. Volkswagen was instrumental in raising the standard of Indian motorsport. The circuits, the facilities, the opportunities for drivers, and of course the quality of the race cars. The 2020 Race Polo is the absolute fastest Polo ever built, a testament to world-class motorsport engineering executed right here in India. But equally interesting was back in 2019, the Volkswagen Motorsport guys made the Polo RX. This was a winter project where the engine was put in the back and driving the rear wheels. This is the country's only mid-engine rear-wheel drive Polo, and it is an absolute riot to drive, built as both a tech showcase as well as a track day car for enthusiasts. Bang in the middle of the very first lockdown, VW, it replaced the 1.2 TSI engine with this, the 1 litre TSI. This was obviously in response to the BS6 emission norms, and this was a modern engine. It was the last engine that the Polo would get, but also the finest. We've said this many times before. This engine, winner of the Engine of the Year award multiple times, absolute gem of a motor. Even though it was downsized over the 1.2, it had more power, 108.5 bhp, 175 Newton meters of torque. The engine in the Polo, that wasn't localized, that was imported. But this also gave VW a lot of data before they started localization of the engine, which then went into the Taigun and delivered that 98% localization content. And what an engine. It complements the Polo so beautifully. Power, torque, enthusiasm, and for the first time, you could get a manual gearbox with the turbo engine. The 1.2, you could only get it with the DSG automatic transmission. So with this, you could spin up the wheels, you could slide it around. Of course, I'm not going to slide this car around. This looks like a nearly brand new car. It still has the plastic on the dials, plastic on the seats. So let's not screw around with this car. But here are some gratuitous sliding shots when I first got my hands on the Polo, when we took it up onto the go-kart track. Oh, I love the Polo. And with this engine, this was the best version of the Polo. And it brought out the best version of the hooligans in us. Imagine if this engine had come right at the start. The Polo would have been flying. It was also very well priced. They had the GT edition of the Polo, obviously with the automatic transmission. Excellent pricing. People fell over themselves going and buying Polos. The Polo also has terrific tuning potential. There's so many of these tuned cars out here on the track right now. This one is the very latest, the 1 liter TSI. This one has got the automatic gearbox and it has a stage 2 tune. Makes around 140 bhp. It's also got an exhaust. Sounds good, goes well. Couple of cars here have got lowering springs, aids the handling. And it just, whoa, this has got a pops and bangs exhaust. Hear that? Yeah, the Polo just lends itself so well to a bit of hoonery. Such a gorgeous Entu cutlet. Some of the cars here have got the GTI steering wheel with paddle shifters. Obviously, that's a nice touch. One of the cars even has shift lights on the steering wheel. And it's just a way to express your individualism. Plaster your character over your car. You can also hear the turbo whistling away. That's quite a rowdy exhaust. And things like the steering, nothing really needs to be done because it's just so well weighted, so well sorted. And with these lowering springs, the handling also becomes so much better. There's so much more grip. This is a soaking wet track and no problem, it's still going. April 2022, that's when the last of the Polos were made and sold. After 12 years, the Polo was scanned and we all shed a tear, And finally the Taigun. Now, when we knew that these MQB A0 iron cars were being made in India and MQB A0 platform was being Indianized, the iron at the end, our fear was that this platform would be cheapened, that it would not ride or handle as all the Volkswagens that we've driven in the past. That was our big fear, and that fear was completely unfounded. The first thing that they told us was that this car has the same amount of torsional rigidity. Actually, the Taigun has even better torsional rigidity than the Polo. And the Polo, the strength it derived, the handling, it all came from the torsional rigidity of the chassis. The MQB A0 iron platform betters on that. And that means for an SUV, The ride, the handling, the dynamics are absolutely top notch. Just look at the way it's going around these tight corners on the go-kart track. It's raining, it's wet, it's slippery, and the grip is immense. The benefit of having such a torsionally rigid chassis is that the dampers can be slightly softer. So you do get a bit of body roll, but the upside is that you get great ride, you get great comfort, and you get great cornering. This really is the best of all worlds. So much fun to drive. The engine, we know and we love it from the Polo. It does splendid work over here. And then there is the GT on the Taigun, which gets the 1.5 TSI engine and the DSG gearbox. And then all the other things that we criticize the Polo for. The lack of equipment, all sorted. It's got a sunroof, it's got a proper infotainment system, it's got a digital cockpit, it's got paddle shifters for the steering wheel, it's got cooled seats, it's got space at the back, it's got everything. So the Taigun, it doesn't lack in any department, to be honest. VW, they heard from our love stories on the Polo, and they also listened to our sub stories, and they addressed it all. We've driven the Taigun plenty, but never on a go-kart track. And throwing it over here on the track, it's surprisingly good. It can even hike an inside wheel when you're throwing it around bends. Of course, now, because it's wet and a little slippery, it's not generating as much grip on the front end. Look at how it is loading up the front, the bite it's generating, and also the traction out of corners. No mid-size SUV, none of the Taigun's rivals, none of them handle as well as enthusiastically. The Taigun, it really has the genes of the Polo in it, and it's all the better for it. So the Polo may be gone, the Polo will never be forgotten, and the Polo's strengths are still alive and well and kicking. Right from the beginning, the Polo was just what we enthusiasts wanted. A small compact car that was fun to drive, that had performance, that had safety, that really put a big wide smile on your face. The Polo, it also lent itself so well to motorsport. It's the reason why Evo India is here today, because it really lit the fires of us enthusiasts when we went rallying with it. But of course, the Polo also had its limitations. It was not as great value for money. It did not have all those features. It did not have backseat space. And all those lessons have been now incorporated into the Taigun. This goes into the hotly contested mid-size SUV space where there are tons of players, and yet this Taigun, it is the most fun to drive. The handling is the most enthusiastic. The performance, it really is the best. The technology with the DSG gearbox, the 1.5 TSI engine, even the 1 liter TSI engine, it is right up there. It has got all the features. It has got the sunroof. Everybody wants a sunroof. This one has got a sunroof, a nice infotainment. Everything that you would want is there in the Taigun. But most importantly, it still reminds you of how fun the Polo was to drive, because this Taigun is also equally good fun to drive. Now, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, share this video with like-minded enthusiasts, stay subscribed to the Evo India channel, smash that bell icon to stay notified for all our video drops, because we will have plenty more gone but not forgotten videos on this channel.